Okay, so here are the answers for your review for test number 2. So number 1 says to, given the polynomials, perform the indicated operations. So A is to add g of x and h of x. B is to subtract h of x minus g of x. C is to multiply f of x times g of x. And D is to do h of x divided by j of x. All right, so let's start with 1A. So 1A is to add f of g of x and h of x. So let's write down our g of x. So g of x is 4x squared plus 2x minus 3. And I'm going to add that to h of x, which is 4x to the third minus 6x squared plus 2x. All right, so when I add, all I have to do is combine like terms. So I have an x to the third. There's no other x to the third, so that's just 4x to the third. 4x squared minus 6x squared, that's negative 2x squared. And then I have 2x plus 2x, that's 4x. And then I have a minus 3. All right, so let's take a look at 1b. So 1b is to take h of x, and h of x is, so we'll make sure you use parentheses because we are subtracting. So it's 4x to the third minus 6x squared plus 2x. And we are subtracting 4x squared plus 2x minus 3. All right, so make sure you distribute the negative 1 here. So when I distribute the positive 1 at the front, I just keep the same thing. So that's 4x to the third minus 6x squared plus 2x minus 4x squared minus 2x plus 3. All right, so then when I combine like terms, let's see what we get. So I have my 4x to the third. I have negative 6x squared and negative 4x squared. That's negative 10x squared. 2x minus 2x, that cancels because they're opposites. And then I have plus 3. All right, so let's take a look at C, 1C. All right, so 1C, we are multiplying. We are multiplying f of x times g of x. G of x is the trinomial, so I'm going to put that on top. So I have here 4x squared plus 2x minus 3. And I'm multiplying that by 2x minus 7. All right, so I'm going to start with the negative 7 here, and I'm going to multiply 7 times everything, and then I'll multiply the 2x by everything, and then add them together. All right, so we have negative 7 times negative 3 is positive 21. Negative 7 times 2x is negative 14x. And negative 7 times 4x squared is negative 28x squared. And now I'm going to multiply 2x. 2x times negative 3 is negative 6x. 2x times 2x is positive 4x squared. And all right, and then I have 2x times 4x squared is going to be 8x to the third. Okay, so now I add them down, so I get 8x to the third. Negative 28x squared and positive 4x squared is negative 24x squared. Negative 14x and negative 6x is negative 20x. And then I have plus 21. All right, so let's take a look at 1D. All right, so 1D is to divide. So it's to divide h of x and j of x. So h of x is 4x cubed minus 6x squared plus 2x, and we're dividing by 2x. So make sure you divide everything by 2x. So we have here, let's start with this, 4x cubed divided by 2x is 2x squared. And then I have the middle here, negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and then x squared divided by x is x. And then I have 2x divided by 2x is positive 1. All right, so let's take a look at 2. Okay, so 2 said, oh, it's the difference quotient. I know you guys love the difference quotient here. All right, so let me write down the difference quotient. Here's the formula for the difference quotient. It's f of x plus f of x plus h, minus f of x divided by h, and h cannot be equal to 0. Okay, so I have f of x is equal to 3x plus 1. So what I do is I just follow the formula. So this formula starts off with this. You're doing f of x plus h. So I take this x plus h and I plug it into my x. That's my input. So it's 3 times x plus h. And then I have my plus 1. Minus f of x, that's minus this. So use parentheses because it's a binomial. Over h. All right, so now I'm going to distribute. Distribute the 3. I get 3x plus 3h plus 1. Distribute the negative, minus 3x minus 1 over h. So 3x and 3x minus 3x cancel. 1 minus 1 cancel, so I'm left with 3h over h, which is equal to, the h is reduced to 1, so I'm left with just 3. All right, so let's take a look at the next one. All right, so I still have my difference quotient here. And now my f of x is equal to 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. So same thing, this is my input. I'm going to input that into these two x's here. So it's 2 times x plus h squared minus 3 times x plus h plus 5. Now I have minus f of x, so it's minus this whole thing. 2x squared minus 3x plus 5 all over h. All right, so now the first thing we need to take care of is this piece right here, the x plus h squared. So x plus h squared, so if you need to do it on the side, do it on the side. X plus h times x plus h. So that's x squared plus xh plus xh plus h squared. And then these two combine to 2xh. So it's 2 times x squared plus, sorry, stylus is not working too well. Okay, so I have here 2 times x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. And then I'm going to distribute the 2. So I get 2x squared plus 4xh plus 2h squared. Distribute the negative 3. Minus 3x minus 3h plus 5. Now I have to distribute the negative there. So that's minus 2x squared minus plus 3x, minus 5. And this is all over h. So what happens is a whole bunch of things cancel. So 2x squared and 2x squared, they cancel because they're opposites. 2x squared minus 2x squared. Then we have negative 3x and positive 3x cancel. Positive 5, negative 5 cancel. So I'm left with 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3h, all over h. And now I reduce all my h's here. So then I'm left with 4x so I'm left with 4x plus 2h minus 3. Okay, so let's go to number 3. Okay, so number 3 says if you're given f of x, right, find this, that means the inverse. So inverse, remember, means to switch x and y. All right, so number 3, f of x is equal to 3x plus 5. So this is really y equals 3x plus 5. Switch x and y. X equals 3y plus 5. And now I solve for y. So minus 5, x minus 5 equals 3y. And then divide both sides by 3. So it's x minus 5 over 3 is equal to y. That's your inverse. So that's the inverse of f of x is equal to x minus 5 over 3. Okay, so let's take a look at 3b. All right, so g of x is equal to the cube root of 5x, and then I have plus 9. So this is y equals the cube root of 5x plus 9. Switch x and y for the inverse. X equals the cube root of 5y plus 9. So the first thing we need to do is subtract 9. So it's x minus 9 equals the cube root of 5y. To get rid of a cube root, you cube both sides. So I have x minus 9 cubed is equal to 5y. Divide by 5. So I get x minus 9 cubed over 5 is equal to y. And then I would write that as the inverse of g of x is equal to x minus 9, that's a 9, cubed over 5. And that's a 9 there, sorry. Okay, so let's take a look at number 3c, sorry. Okay, so 3c is h of x is equal to 5 halves x minus 3 halves. All right, so this is y equals 5 halves x minus 3 halves. Switch x and y. So now I add 3 halves to both sides. X plus 3 halves equals 5 over 2y. Now we want to get rid of the fraction. So to get rid of the fraction, you want to get rid of the 2. So multiply both sides by 2. So you have to make sure you distribute. So I get 2x. When I multiply this here, I get rid of the 2's. So I'm just left with plus 3 equals. The 2's get rid of here. And we're left with 5y. Divide both sides by 5. 2x plus 3 over 5 is equal to y. And that would be the inverse of h of x is equal to 2x plus 3 over 5. All right, so let's take a look at 4. Okay, so 4 is to determine the domain and the range. All right, so it's easier to see on your paper that with this graph, there is a hole in the graph right here. There is a hole, so that's an open circle right there. So I'm just going to put that in red. So there's a hole right there. At x is equal to 1, there's a hole. All right, so we want the domain and the range. So let's start with the domain. So remember, your domain are your x values. So we're talking about how far to the left and how far to the right it goes. Now, your graph has an arrow at the end of it. So on the left, there is an arrow over here. So that means your graph keeps going to the left. So that means it's coming from negative infinity. So as your graph comes to the right, so you have all these x values that are being used, and then we get to this x value. Now this x value is not being used at 1. So we have to write that first. So the domain is from negative infinity to 1, but it's not including 1 because it's an open circle. And then your graph continues from 1, keeps going, right? And then it goes up, and then it keeps going to the right, so it's going to infinity. So we use union 1 to infinity. All right, now the range. The range is how far down it goes. It's going down to this number here, which is negative 6. So it's from negative 6, including negative 6, so it's bracket. Now it keeps going up. All these y values are being used, even here at negative 1, because you have this y value and this y value being used. And then it just keeps going up and up and up. So it's from negative 6 to infinity. All right, so let's take a look at B. All right, so I have a couple of holes here. I have a hole here. I have a hole here. There's no arrow here, so it stops here, but there is an arrow here. So I have a hole here and a hole here. So let's start with the domain. So my domain starts here, right? It doesn't go any further left than this. So this is negative 7 here. And it's including negative 7 because there's no open circle. So it's bracket, negative 7, comma. Now, your x values keep going and going and going. And then when you get to this x value at negative 2, right, it's an open circle. So this x value here is not being used. So that's 4. And that'll be a parentheses because we're not using it. And then it's union. And then from 4, it goes to 1, and that's not being used. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not 4 here. That is 2, my bad. So this is actually 2 here. Sorry about that. 2. And then from 2, negative 2, sorry. Negative 2 to 1. So it's parentheses, negative 2, comma, 1. 1 is an open bracket, parentheses, because we're not using that. And then from 1, it keeps going to the right. And we're using all these x values, and then all these x values just keep going to the right. So then it's union 1 to infinity. And then that's a parentheses too. All right, so now let's do the range. Your range or your y values. So my y value, since this keeps going down and down and down and down, it's coming from negative infinity, even though it stops here, but this side keeps going down. And then it goes up here, and it stops here at 4, but it doesn't include 4. So it's 4 with a parentheses. All right, so let's take a look at 5. Okay, so 5 says, given the function, we want to verify that the composition of a function and its inverse will give us x when we do that. All right, so here's my function f of x. The first thing is I have to find the inverse. So this is y equals 3x minus 5. So I switch x and y. So I get x equals 3y minus 5. So I add 5, I get x plus 5 is equal to 3y, and then I divide by 3. Y is equal to x plus 5 over 3. So there's my inverse. So my inverse of f of x is equal to x plus 5 divided by 3. All right, so now I want to do this composition. F of the inverse of f of x, does that give me, so it's like question mark, does it give me x? It's a proof. So I want f of the inverse. Does that give me x? My inverse is x plus 5 over 3. So now I want to take this and I want to plug it into my f, which is this x value here. So it's going to be 3 times my x, which is going to be x plus 5 over 3. And then I have that minus 5. And does that give me x? So now I'm going to simplify. So 3 and 3 reduce to 1, so I'm left with x plus 5 minus 5 equals x. 5 minus 5 is 0, so I'm left with x equals x, and that checks. All right, so let's take a look at B. All right, so same thing. First thing is I have to find my inverse. So this is y equals the square root of 2x plus 7. So I switch x and y, and I get x is equal to the square root of 2y minus plus 7. To get rid of the square root, you square both sides. So I get x squared is equal to the square root of 2y plus 7. Minus 7, x squared minus 7 equals 2y. And then divide by 2. Y is equal to x squared minus 7 divided by 2. And this is the inverse of f of x is equal to x squared minus 7 over 2. All right, so now I want this composition. So it's the composition of f of the inverse of f of x. Does that give me x? So I want f of the inverse. The inverse is x squared minus 7 over 2. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my f function, and wherever I see an x, I'm going to plug in x squared minus 7 over 2. So I have the square root of 2 times my x, which is x squared minus 7 over 2, plus 7. Does that give me x? So let's see. So when I simplify this here, 2 and 2 reduce. I'm left with the square root of x squared minus 7 plus 7. Does that give me x? Negative 7 plus 7 reduces, so it's the square root of x squared equals x. The square root of x squared is x equals x, and that checks. All right, so let's take a look at 6a. Okay, so 6 is to factor completely. So let me write down number 6a. So 6a is 8 8x to the 4th plus 27xy to the 3rd. So I notice there is a GCF, so you have to factor out the GCF, which is x, times 8x to the 3rd plus 27y to the 3rd. So I have 3 terms, so it can only be difference of 2 terms, so it can only be difference of perfect squares or difference of perfect cubes. In this case, it's difference of perfect cubes. So we're going to do SOAP. Same, opposite, always positive. All right, so I have same sign, so it's plus will be plus here. Opposite, minus, and always positive. Remember, inside the parentheses, it's a squared, b squared, and then ab in the middle. So we need our a and our b. So a is the cube root of 8x to the 3rd, which is 2x. And b is the cube root of 27y to the 3rd, which is 3y. So we're going to plug in our a and our b, So it's 2x and 3y. And then it's 2x squared. And in the end, it's 3y squared. So I'm using parentheses because I have to square it. And then it's a times b, so it's 6xy. So this will be 2x plus 3y. When I square this, I get 4x squared minus 6xy. And then when I square this, I get plus 9y squared. Okay, so let's take a look at, oh, and then don't forget to bring down the x right there. So that x will go out into the front here. It will be right there in the front. So that would be my answer. Okay, so let's take a look at 6b. All right, so 6b is 6x to the 4th minus 11x squared minus 10. So there is no GCF, so it's a trinomial master product. So I multiply the first times the last. That's negative 60x to the 4th. So now what numbers multiply to 60 and minus to 11? That would be 15 and 4. So it's 15x squared and 4x squared. They get different signs, and I need to get negative 11 when I add. So it's negative 15 and positive 4. Bring down the front and the end. And now we factor using grouping. So the GCF of the first group is 3x squared times 2 minus, oh sorry, this should be an x to the 4th. So it would be 2x squared minus 5. And the GCF of the second group would be positive 2 times 2x squared minus 5. So my factors are 3x squared plus 2 and 2x squared minus 5. Okay, so let's take a look at 6c. So 6c is 10x squared minus 5x minus 6x plus 3. And then we're going to group 4 terms. So the GCF of the first group would be 5x times 2x minus 1. The GCF of the green group is negative 3 times 2x minus 1. So my factors are 5x minus 3 times 2x minus 1. Okay, so let's take a look at 6D. So 6D is 4x to the 4th minus 13x squared plus 9. So there's no GCF, so it's trinomial. I multiply the first times the last. I get positive 36x to the 4th. So what multiplies to 36 adds to 13, that's 9 and 4. So that's 9x squared and 4x squared. They get the same signs. They're both negative. That's how I get negative 13. Bring down the plus 9. Bring down the 4x to the 4th. And now we factor by grouping. So in the blue group, the GCF is x squared. And then I get 4x squared minus 9. The GCF of the second group is negative 1 times 4x squared minus 9. So now I have my factors are x squared minus 1 and 4x squared minus 9. And then I can factor again. This is dots, and so is this. So x squared minus 1 becomes x plus 1, x minus 1. And then the second one, this one, is 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 3. All right, let's take a look at 7. That's the binomial expansion. All right, so 7 is to expand the binomial 2x minus y to the 5th power. And remember, we use combinations, NCR, P to the R, Q to the N minus R power. Okay, so we do 5C5, 5C4, 5C3, 5C2, 5C1, 5C0. And then it's 2x to the 5th, 2x to the fourth, 2x to the third, 2x to the second, 2x to the first, 2x to the 0. And then it is negative y to the 0, negative y to the first, negative y squared, negative y to the third, negative y to the fourth, that's a 4, and negative y to the fifth. Okay, so we have now 5C5 is 1, 5C4 is 5, 5C3 is 10, 5C2 is 10, 5C4 is 5, and 5C0 is 1. 2x to the fifth power is 32x to the fifth. And then we have 2x to the fourth power is 16x to the fourth. 2x to the third is 8x to the third. 2x squared is 4x squared. Times 2x to the first times 2x to the 0 is 1. And then we have negative y to the 0 is 1. Negative y to the first is negative y. Remember, that's multiplying there. Negative y squared is y squared. Negative y to the third is negative y to the third. Negative y to the fourth is y to the fourth. And negative y to the fifth is negative y to the fifth. I'm just going to write the expansion down here. You should, and then write these over here. I just ran out of, actually, I think I can move this over a little bit. Yep. All right, so we have, for the first one is 32 x to the fifth. And then 5 times 16 is 80, but it's negative because I have that negative y. So it's negative 80 x to the fourth y. And then I have 80 x to the third y squared. And then I have 40 times the negative y, so it's negative 40 x squared y to the third. And then 5 times 2 is 10 x y to the fourth, and negative y to the fifth power. And then you have to make sure, just make sure you write the expansion down at the bottom. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so 7b is 3a squared plus 2b cubed to the fourth. So that's going to start off with, so that'll start off with 4C4, 4C3, 4C2, 4C1, 4C0. And then it's going to be 3a squared to the fourth, 3a squared to the third, 3a squared squared, 3a squared to the first, 3a squared to the 0. And then it's going to be 2b to the third to the 0, 2b to the third to the first, 2b to the third squared, 2b to the third to the third, 2b to the third to the fourth. Okay, so then we have 4C4 is 1, 4C3 is 4, 4C2 is 6, 4C1 is 4, and then 4C0 is 1. All right, 3a squared to the 4th power. So 3 to the 4th is 81. So it's 81a to the 8th times 27a to the 6th times 9a to the 4th times 3a squared times 1. Then I have times 1 times 2b to the 3rd times 4b to the 6th times 8b to the 9th times 16b to the 12th. Okay, so let's see what we got now. So this is 81a to the 8th. And then I have 216a to the 6th, b to the 3rd, 216a to the 4th, b to the 6th, 96a squared, b to the 9th, and 16b to the 12th. And then just make sure that you do write the expansion down here. Okay, so let's take a look at 8, A, B, and C. Okay, so 8 is to find the nth term here. So I want the 4th term. So you're going to count backwards from 9 and count on your fingers till you get to your 4th finger from 9. So it'll be 9, 7. So it'll be 9, 8, 7, 6. So it would be 9C6 we would use. Okay, so it'd be 9C6. The first term is x, so it's x to the 6th, and then 2y to the 3rd power. So 9C6 is 84 times x to the 6th times 8y to the 3rd, and then 84 times 8 is 672, x to the 6th, y to the 3rd. Okay, so let's take a look at 8b. Now 8b says to find the last term. So remember, you start at 7C7 for the first, that's your first term. Your last term goes all the way down to 7C0 would be your last term. So 7C0 is the last term. 3x squared to the 0. And then 2y to the 3rd to the 7th power. So 7C0 is 1. 3x squared to the 0 is 1. 2y to the 3rd to the 7th is 128, y to the 21. So it's just 128, y to the 21st power. Okay, so let's take a look at number 8, letter 8C. So that is to find the middle term. So I have x to the 6. So x to the 6, I'm sorry, x to the 6, 6th power. So that goes from 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So notice there's 7 terms. So my middle term, right, would be this. There's 3 on this side and 3 on this side. So I want 6C3. So I want 6C3. So 6C3, x to the 3rd, and 3y squared to the 3rd. 6C3 is 20 times x to the 3rd. 3y squared to the 3rd would be 27y to the 6th. And 20 times 27 would be 540, x to the 3rd, y to the 6th power. All right, let's take a look at 9. So 9 is to do the composition. All right, so for number 9, I want to do f of g of x. So it's f of g of x. I'm just doing substitution. I'm replacing g of x with what it's equal to, which is 2x plus 1. So this means to go to my f function, and wherever I see an x, I'm going to plug in 2x plus 1. So it's 3 times 2x plus 1 plus 5. So that's 6x plus 3 plus 5. So that's 6x plus 8. All right, so let's take a look at B. So B is g of f of x. So that's g of x minus 5. So I go to my g function. Wherever I see an x, I plug in x minus 5. So it's 2 times x minus 5 squared plus 3 times x minus 5 minus 4. All right, so I have to take care of the x minus 5 squared. So that's 2 times x minus 5 times x minus 5. So when I double distribute, it's 2 times x squared minus 10x plus 25. So that is 2x squared minus 20x plus 50. And then when I distribute the 3, I get plus 3x minus 15, and then I have minus 4. All right, so when I combine like terms, I get 2x squared, negative 20x, and positive 3x is negative 17x. 50 minus 15 is 35, and then 35 minus 4 would be 31. Okay, so let's take a look at the last problem, 10. Okay, so 10 is to solve the quadratics, and you have to express it in simplest radical form. And the first one, you have to use completing the square. Second one has to be quadratic formula. All right, so let's start with the first one. In order to complete the square, you have to have a leading coefficient of a 1. So you have to divide everything by 2, both sides. So I get x squared minus 8x plus 4 equals 0. All right, and then we minus 4 to both sides. X squared minus 8x equals negative 4. Then I do half of negative 8, which is negative 4. Squared is 16, and I add that to both sides. So that's x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals negative 4 plus 16, which is 12. And then when I factor the left side over here, I get the same parentheses, so it's x minus 4 squared. So to get rid of the square, you square root both sides. So that's x minus 4 equals plus minus. Don't forget the plus minus. You have to simplify the square root of 12. That's the square root of 4 and the square root of 3. So that's 2 the square root of 3. And then you add 4 to both sides. You get x equals 4 plus minus 2 the square root of 3. Okay, so let's try B using completing the square, quadratic formula, sorry. All right, so quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Actually, let me put that in black. There, all right, so this is x equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So for b, though, the first thing you have to do is you have to get it to equal 0, so you have to minus 5. So that's x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0. All right, so my a is 1, b is negative 2, c is negative 5. So that's x equals 2 plus minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 5 over 2 times 1. So that's x equals 2 plus minus the square root of 24 over 2. You have to simplify the square root of 24, square root of 4, square root of 6. So that's 2 to the square root of 6. So it's 2 plus minus 2 to the square root of 6 over 2. And then you have to reduce here. The 2's reduced to all 1's. So x equals 1 plus minus the square root of 6. Okay, so that is it. And happy studying. Sorry it's a long video. And I'll see you guys tomorrow in class. Have a good night.